The plus-size woman threw 82 checks at the Mafia boss. What he said next stunned everyone. Why would she throw exactly 82 checks at a Mafia boss? And what could he possibly say afterward that would leave everyone stunned? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We are glad you are here for another emotional story about courage, power, and an unforgettable confrontation. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming stories. Thank you for spending your time with us and for continuing to support the channel. Now, tell us in the comments, would you have the courage to stand your ground against someone powerful when you believed you were right? Get comfortable, settle in, and let us begin at the moment when everything changed. I threw 82 checks across Dominic Russo's table before anyone in the room could stop me. They scattered over white linen, crystal glasses, and polished silver like paper confetti at the world's worst celebration. One landed beside Dominic's hand. Another slid beneath a water glass. The rest spread across a table surrounded by men in dark suits who suddenly looked as if breathing required permission. Count them, I said. Nobody moved. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it beneath the soft jazz playing somewhere behind me, but I kept my shoulders straight. I had spent 31 years learning that people made assumptions before I opened my mouth. Too big, too ordinary, too emotional, too easy to intimidate. I had stopped shrinking for other people's comfort a long time ago. Tonight, that lesson had carried me into a private charity dinner on the 47th floor of a Manhattan hotel, wearing a burgundy dress, inexpensive black heels, and enough anger to make good judgment feel optional. Dominic Russo sat at the head of the table. 38. Dark hair. Charcoal suit. No raised voice. No dramatic expression. I had heard his name whispered often enough to understand what kind of man people believed him to be. His family operated businesses all over New York, but there were other stories too, the kind people lowered their voices to tell. Nobody called Dominic Russo a mafia boss to his face. I had just thrown 82 checks at him. Everyone cleared, I said. Every month, for almost 7 years. 82 payments. A man to Dominic's right started to stand. Dominic lifted one finger. The man sat back down. That tiny movement frightened me more than shouting would have. Dominic picked up the check nearest his hand. My mother's handwriting was on the first 37. Mine was on the rest. After she died, I had taken over Bennett and Rye, the Brooklyn bakery she built with a second-hand oven, borrowed money, and more stubbornness than any reasonable person should inherit. The debt came with it. So did the promise I made beside her hospital bed. Keep the bakery. Pay what we owe. Do not let anyone take it. I had done exactly that. Then, 48 hours earlier, a certified letter from Mercer Financial Services informed me that an unpaid balance remained and that the debt had been transferred to a company connected to Russo Holdings. If the matter was not resolved, the bakery property could become subject to further collection action. I had called Mercer 6 times. Nobody gave me a straight answer. So I brought my answer here. 82 canceled checks. I paid it, I said. Dominic turned the check over and studied the bank endorsement. Miss Bennett. Hearing my name from him sent a chill through me. Do not call me that like we are discussing the weather. Someone at the table inhaled sharply. Dominic looked up. His eyes were dark, steady, unreadable. How did you get into this room? The elevator. A few people looked down, possibly hiding smiles. Dominic did not. This is a private event. So was my mother's bakery until somebody decided your company owned part of it. I pulled the certified letter from my purse and dropped it beside the checks. I do not care how many buildings you own, how many people stand when you enter a room, or how nervous everyone becomes when somebody says your name. That bakery belongs to my family. Dominic read the letter without interrupting me. 82 checks, I repeated. Principal, interest, every scheduled payment. I do not owe you anything. Silence settled over the room. Dominic placed the letter down. Then he began sorting through the checks. 1, 7, 12, 23. His expression remained calm until he reached a check somewhere near the middle. He turned it over twice. Then he looked at the letter again. I braced myself for a threat, an argument, anything that would justify the fear I had carried into that room. Instead, Dominic leaned back in his chair and said 4 words that stunned everyone at the table. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. For several seconds, I thought I had misunderstood him. Men like Dominic Russo were not supposed to agree when you stormed into their private dinner and covered their table with bank records. They were supposed to become angry, defensive, maybe have you escorted downstairs while everyone pretended not to watch. Dominic did none of those things. He picked up the certified letter again and tapped one line with his finger. Russo Holdings did not send this. I stared at him. Your company's name is printed right there. A company connected to mine is referenced there. That is not the same thing. That sounds like the kind of sentence expensive lawyers invent. A man across the table coughed into his hand. Dominic's eyes stayed on mine. Who gave you this letter? Mercer Financial Services. Something changed around the table. Not dramatically. Nobody gasped. But Dominic's attorney, a silver-haired woman seated 3 chairs away, stopped writing. Dominic noticed too. Who at Mercer? He asked. Evan Mercer. Personally. His signature is at the bottom. Dominic slid the letter toward his attorney. Laura. She read it quickly. Her expression tightened. This document references North Harbor Asset Management. Dominic nodded once. Which has a servicing agreement with Mercer. I folded my arms. And North Harbor is connected to you. Indirectly. That is still connected. Yes. His willingness to admit that irritated me because I had arrived prepared to fight excuses. Then why are you taking my bakery? Dominic leaned forward slightly. I am not. The letter says otherwise. The letter says an outstanding balance may be subject to collection. It does not say I authorized it. Your name is the reason I am standing here. My name is not on that letter. He was right. I hated that immediately. The notice mentioned an affiliated holding structure, but Russo appeared only in the attached servicing disclosure I had received with it. I had connected the rest myself. Dominic picked up another check. Did Mercer tell you directly that I was taking Bennett and Rye? He told me the debt had changed hands. That was not my question. His voice never rose. Somehow that made me listen harder. No, I admitted. He did not say your name. Dominic looked toward Laura. When did Mercer begin servicing the Bennett account? She reached for her tablet. I will verify. I stepped forward. Verify what? Dominic held up check number 42. Whether these payments ever reached the account they were supposed to reach. My anger shifted into something colder. They cleared my bank. Clearing your bank proves the money left you. It does not prove the ledger receiving it was credited correctly. I looked down at the checks scattered across the linen. For years, each canceled check had meant relief. Proof that I had kept another piece of my promise to my mother. Suddenly they looked different. You think Mercer stole the payments? I asked. I did not say that. Then what are you saying? I am saying we do not accuse people before we have evidence. Coming from a man whose reputation could silence a room, the sentence caught me off guard. Dominic gathered several checks into a neat stack. I need copies of all 82. I reached across the table and took them from his hand. No. The room went silent again. Dominic looked at my fingers wrapped around the checks. No. These are originals from my bank records. You are not keeping them. I need to examine the endorsements. Then make copies. That will take time. I have already spent almost 7 years paying this debt. I can survive another hour. Something almost amused moved through his expression. You came here demanding answers, and now you are making the process difficult. I came here demanding my bakery. I pulled the stack closer. If you want to touch the originals again, sign a receipt. Someone at the far end of the table actually whispered, Jesus. Dominic turned his head. The whisper died instantly. Then he looked back at me, reached for a pen, and pulled a blank sheet of hotel stationery toward himself. What exactly would you like the receipt to say? I blinked. You are serious? You asked. He wrote while I dictated. 82 original canceled checks received temporarily for examination. No transfer of ownership. All originals to be returned. When he finished, he signed his name and slid the paper toward me. I read every word twice. Satisfied? He asked. Temporarily. That earned the smallest smile. Laura returned her attention to the tablet. Dominic. His smile vanished. What? She turned the screen toward him. Mercer began servicing the account 19 months ago. Dominic looked at the checks. Which payment was first processed after the transfer? Laura scrolled. Number 64. I found it in the pile and handed it over. Dominic turned it around. His eyes narrowed at the endorsement on the back. Then he looked at Laura. That account number is wrong. My stomach dropped. Dominic placed check 64 between us. Claire, he said quietly. Someone changed where your money was going. Someone changed where your money was going. The sentence emptied the room of everything except the sound of my own breathing. I stared at check 64 as if the numbers on the back might rearrange themselves if I looked long enough. They did not. I used the payment instructions Mercer sent me, I said. Dominic nodded. Do you still have them? Every letter, every email, every statement. Laura looked up from her tablet, including the notice that changed the remittance address. I thought back 19 months. A white envelope. New servicing instructions. Evan Mercer's signature printed beneath a paragraph about administrative restructuring. Yes. Dominic pushed check 64 toward me. Then tomorrow morning, bring copies. To you? To Laura. I glanced at her. No offense. None taken, she said. But why should I trust anyone connected to this? Dominic leaned back. You should not. That answer stopped me. Trust the records. Trust your bank. Trust your accountant. Verify everything we show you. He nodded toward the receipt he had signed. You were right to make me document the checks. Nobody had ever made distrust sound so reasonable. I gathered my purse. I want the originals back tonight. Laura arranged for the hotel office to scan all 82 while I stood beside the machine, watching every page. Dominic did not complain. 40 minutes later, I counted the checks twice, placed them inside my envelope, and left. At 8:15 the next morning, I unlocked Bennett and Rye. The bakery smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and the sourdough starter my mother had named Gloria because apparently even yeast deserved personality. My accountant, Michael Grant, arrived before 9. We covered the back table with bank statements, servicing letters, and payment notices. When I showed him check 64, his forehead tightened. Claire, this endorsement is different. I noticed. No, I mean structurally different. Checks 63 and earlier were processed through the original servicing account. 64 onward were routed somewhere else. I found the Mercer letter from 19 months earlier. There it was. New payment instructions. Same date the servicing arrangement changed. Michael read it twice. You followed their directions. So I paid. You sent payment exactly where you were instructed. At 10:30, Laura called. She had found something else. 3 other small businesses serviced through Mercer had reported disputed balances during the previous year. My anger returned, but now it had somewhere useful to go. By noon, I was back in Manhattan with Michael beside me and copies of everything in 2 folders. Dominic met us in a conference room instead of the private dining room. No audience this time. No crystal glasses. Just paperwork. Your accountant stays, Dominic said before I could ask. Good, I replied. Because he was staying anyway. Michael looked like he wanted to become invisible. Laura compared the Mercer notice with records from North Harbor. This account number does not belong to the authorized servicing account, she said. Who controls it? I asked. We are confirming that through counsel and the bank. Dominic's expression hardened. No assumptions until we have documentation. I looked at him. You really enjoy saying that. It prevents expensive mistakes. Is that the only reason? His eyes met mine. No. Something in his voice told me not to ask the second reason yet. Laura placed 3 redacted complaint summaries beside my records. Similar payment discrepancies. Similar servicing notices. Different family businesses. I felt cold. So I was not the only one. Apparently not, she said. Dominic stood and walked toward the window. Manhattan stretched beneath him, bright and distant. For the first time, his power looked less impressive than the responsibility attached to it. North Harbor operates under a company tied to one of my legitimate holdings, he said. If Mercer used that connection to make these notices credible, then my name helped open the door. I had expected denial. Instead, he turned back toward me. That makes part of this mine. The room fell quiet. I folded my arms. Then what are you going to do? Dominic's answer came immediately. Find out exactly what happened. And then, his gaze became unreadable again. Then I deal with Mercer. I knew enough about Dominic Russo's reputation to dislike the way that sounded. No. Michael nearly dropped his pen. Dominic stared at me. Excuse me. You heard me. I stepped closer to the table. If somebody took my payments, I want records. I want investigators. I want every business affected to get the truth. Dominic's jaw tightened. Claire, I do not need revenge. I pointed to the 82 copies between us. I need the truth on paper. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Dominic looked at Laura. Contact outside counsel. Preserve every record. Nothing happens without documentation. Laura nodded. Dominic turned back to me. Your way. That should have relieved me. Instead, I realized something far more unsettling. The most powerful man in the room had just changed his decision because I asked him to. For the next 3 days, my bakery became the least glamorous headquarters in New York. Michael occupied the corner table with a laptop and enough spreadsheets to frighten normal people. I worked the counter, decorated birthday cakes, argued with a supplier about butter prices, and answered Laura's calls between customers. Outside counsel had begun comparing Mercer records with bank documentation from the other affected businesses. Every few hours, another piece moved into place. None of it made me feel better. By Friday morning, we knew at least 4 family businesses had received servicing notices with payment instructions that did not match the authorized North Harbor account. One was a florist in Queens. Another was a neighborhood hardware store. The third was a small diner whose owner had spent 26 years serving breakfast before sunrise. I stared at their names on the summary Laura sent me and felt my anger sharpen. This was no longer about my mother's bakery. At 11:20, the bell above my front door rang. I looked up from a tray of cinnamon rolls and nearly dropped the icing bag. Dominic Russo stood inside Bennett and Rye. Alone. No dark-suited men. No private room waiting for him. Just Dominic in a charcoal overcoat while 3 retirees drank coffee near the window, and a mother negotiated cookie limits with a 6-year-old. Every rumor I had ever heard about him suddenly looked ridiculous beside the chalkboard advertising $2 blueberry muffins. You are staring, he said. You look strange near cupcakes. I have survived worse. That sounds exactly like something a man with your reputation would say. His eyes moved around the bakery. Old brick walls. Mismatched wooden tables. My mother's framed handwritten menu hanging behind the register. This is what the debt was for. This is what everything was for. Dominic stepped toward the counter, but stopped when 2 customers moved ahead of him. He waited. That surprised me more than it should have. When his turn came, I folded my arms. What can I get you? Coffee. That is disappointing. Should I order something complicated? You seem like a black coffee person. I am. Of course you are. I poured it and told him the price. He paid exactly what the register showed. No ridiculous tip. No attempt to buy the building. Progress. Laura said you found another business, I said. Dominic nodded. Possibly 2 more. Counsel is obtaining authorization before reviewing their records. Legally. You made your preference extremely clear. Good. He looked at me over the coffee cup. Do you always assume I am about to do something improper? Your reputation does some of the work for me. His expression did not change, but the room seemed quieter in my head. And what exactly have you heard? I wiped the counter even though it was already clean. That people do not tell Dominic Russo no. You did. Repeatedly. I noticed. And I am still here. Was that in doubt? I looked at him. He sounded genuinely offended by the implication. People tell stories. People enjoy stories because facts are usually less entertaining. Are the stories wrong? Dominic took a slow breath. Not all of them. That was the first time he had acknowledged the darkness surrounding his name without hiding behind corporate language. But this situation stays with lawyers, auditors, banks, and investigators. You asked for truth on paper. That is what you will get. I studied him. Why are you listening to me? Because you were right. You knew me for approximately 10 minutes when you decided that. No. He glanced toward the framed menu behind me. I knew you for 10 minutes when I realized you were willing to walk into a room full of people who frightened you because you believed your mother had been cheated. My throat tightened. Dominic continued quietly. That told me enough to listen. Before I could answer, Michael emerged from the back office holding his laptop. His face had gone pale. Claire, you need to see this. He placed the computer on the counter. Laura had sent a newly verified transaction report. Payments from 3 businesses had been routed through the same unauthorized account. At the bottom was the registered administrator. Evan Mercer. I stared at the name. Dominic read it beside me. His entire expression became still. There it is, I whispered. Dominic reached for his phone. I knew exactly what instinct had just taken over. Do not. His hand stopped. Claire, you promised. His eyes stayed on mine for several long seconds. Then, slowly, he placed the phone face down on the counter. Outside counsel, he said. Investigators. Documentation. Yes. Dominic nodded once. Your way. And standing beneath my mother's handwritten menu, I realized the frightening part was no longer that Dominic Russo had enough power to ignore me. It was that he had enough power to do almost anything, and somehow I had become the person he chose to listen to. Dominic left Bennett and Rye without making the call I had stopped him from making, and somehow that felt more important than anything he could have done with it. By Monday, the investigation had widened. Laura confirmed that 5 small businesses had received nearly identical servicing instructions from Mercer Financial Services, and every disputed payment had passed through the same unauthorized account. The records were being preserved. Attorneys were contacting the affected owners. Banks were reviewing transaction histories. Nothing about it was fast, dramatic, or satisfying. It was paperwork. Endless paperwork. I loved every boring page of it because boring meant evidence, and evidence meant nobody could rewrite what happened later. Meanwhile, Bennett and Rye still had to open at 6 every morning. Doe did not care about financial misconduct. Customers still wanted coffee. Cakes still needed frosting. On Tuesday afternoon, I was carrying a 25-pound bag of flour toward the kitchen when Dominic walked through the door. "Do you ever visit during normal lunch hours?" I asked. "It is 2:15. "Exactly. Lunch ended 15 minutes ago." He took the flour from my arms before I could object. "Where does this go?" "You are wearing a coat that probably costs more than my refrigerator." That did not answer the question. I pointed toward the kitchen. Second shelf. Watching Dominic Russo carry flour through my bakery was so absurd that I followed him just to make sure reality had not developed a sense of humor. He placed the bag exactly where I indicated. "Anything else?" "Yes." "Explain why." "You are here." He leaned against the prep table. "Laura has an update. I preferred to tell you in person." "That sounds ominous." "It is complicated." He explained that North Harbor had failed to detect irregularities in Mercer's servicing reports for months. The unauthorized account had not belonged to Russo Holdings, but the oversight structure had been weak enough for Mercer to exploit the association. "So your company did not take my money," I said. "No." Dominic paused. "But an organization connected to me failed to notice what was happening. That is not the same thing." "No. It is still responsibility." I looked at him. Men with less power had spent my entire life finding creative ways to avoid those words. Dominic said them without decoration. "My name was on the door," he continued. "That makes part of this mine." Something inside me shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But perhaps the beginning of it. My mother used to say responsibility is what remains after excuses leave the room. Dominic glanced toward her handwritten menu hanging beyond the kitchen doorway. "I think I would have liked your mother. She would have charged you extra for looking intimidating. That seems unfair." She believed in personalized pricing. His laugh surprised me. It was quiet and brief, but real. For a moment, he was not the man people whispered about. He was simply standing in my kitchen with flour dust on one sleeve. Then the front bell rang. A delivery driver handed me a certified envelope addressed to Bennett and Rye. My stomach tightened immediately. Dominic did not reach for it. He waited while I signed. Inside was a formal notice from Mercer's attorney disputing my payment history and claiming that several checks could not be properly attributed to my account. I read it twice. Anger burned behind my ribs. They are still saying I owe them. Dominic held out his hand, then stopped. "May I?" The question mattered more than it should have. I gave him the letter. He read it carefully. "They are challenging attribution, not denying receipt." "What difference does that make?" "A significant one." He returned the page. "They are narrowing their position." So they may? "No, the broader claim will not survive scrutiny." I looked at the letter again. "What happens now?" "Your attorney responds with the bank records and servicing instructions." "And if Mercer keeps pushing?" Dominic's face became unreadable. "Then the process continues." I studied him. "You hate saying that." "Very much. But you are saying it." "Because you asked me to." I folded the notice and returned it to the envelope. "Good." Dominic moved toward the front door, then stopped beneath my mother's menu. "Claire." "What?" "For years, people have mistaken fear for respect around me." His voice was quieter now. "You apparently have no interest in giving me either one for free." I smiled despite myself. "Respect is expensive. I am beginning to understand that." He left, and I stood there listening to the bell settle above the door. Then Michael called from the office. His voice sounded different. "Claire, Laura just sent another document." I hurried to his desk. On his screen was a newly recovered internal Mercer ledger. Beside my account were the other businesses, the redirected payments, and a column labeled adjustments. At the bottom of the page was an authorization code attached to every change. Michael pointed at the same initials repeated 18 times. That is not an automated entry, he said. Someone approved each one individually. I stared at those initials, realizing this had never been a clerical mistake. Someone had made a choice every single month. Someone had approved every redirected payment, 1 month at a time, and suddenly the word mistake felt almost insulting. Michael enlarged the authorization column while I stood beside his desk with both hands pressed against the edge. The same initials appeared beside every adjustment connected to my account. E.M. I did not need anyone to tell me what they probably meant. Evan Mercer, I said. Michael nodded cautiously. Probably, but we need verification. I almost laughed. Dominic was rubbing off on all of us. Send it to Laura. 20 minutes later, she called. By late afternoon, outside counsel had confirmed that the authorization code had been assigned to Mercer's executive credentials. More importantly, the ledger showed something we had not understood before. My payments had not simply disappeared. They had been received, redirected, then recorded internally as unresolved balances while the official statements continued showing money due. The same pattern appeared across several small business accounts. I sat alone at a bakery table after closing and stared at the 82 canceled checks inside their envelope. My mother had written the first 37. I had written 45 more after she died. For years, those checks had represented obligation. Now they looked like testimony. At 7:10, the bell above the door rang even though I had flipped the sign to closed. Dominic stood outside. I unlocked the door. You know what closed means. Usually. Apparently not tonight. He entered carrying a folder, but he did not sit until I pointed toward a chair. That small hesitation did not escape me. Laura told me about the ledger, I said. There is more. He opened the folder. Independent reviewers had traced the disputed transactions and confirmed that North Harbor's oversight procedures should have detected inconsistencies much earlier. Dominic placed the report between us. My companies did not authorize Mercer's instructions, but our controls failed. You already admitted that. I am admitting more now. He looked directly at me. I spent years building organizations where people were afraid to bring me bad news. That makes problems easy to hide. I had no sarcastic answer ready. Fear keeps people quiet, I said. I know. Did you always know? His silence answered first. No. Rain tapped softly against the front window. The bakery smelled like sugar and warm bread. And for once Dominic looked less like a man who controlled rooms and more like someone finally seeing what that control had cost him. Outside counsel recommends notifying the affected businesses formally, providing the records, cooperating with the banks, and referring the findings to the appropriate authorities, he said. Then do that. I already authorized it. I raised an eyebrow. Without asking me. It is my responsibility to correct my company's failures. I do not need your permission to do the right thing. I smiled. Careful. That almost sounded healthy. His mouth curved slightly. Then his expression hardened as he looked at Mercer's name. There are other ways I could deal with this. I know. Faster ways. Probably. Ways people expect from me. I leaned forward. And what do you expect from yourself? That stopped him. I watched the question settle somewhere deeper than I intended. Dominic looked toward my mother's handwritten menu. I am still deciding. Then decide who you want to be after everyone stops being afraid of you. His eyes returned to mine. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he closed the folder. The legal process continues. Good. Mercer receives no private visit. No pressure outside counsel. No favors called in. Good. You enjoy this. Immensely. He gave a quiet laugh. Then he reached into the folder and removed one final page. There is something else. It was a preliminary reconciliation of my account. 82 payments received. 82 payments verified. Estimated remaining balance after correction, 0. My throat tightened. 0. Subject to final certification. I touched the page carefully. My mother paid every payment she promised. And so did you. For a moment, I could not speak. Dominic did not fill the silence. He simply waited. That restraint mattered more than comfort would have. Finally, I looked up. When this is finished, I do not want special treatment. I know. I want the same correction for every business affected. They will receive it. And I do not want anyone saying Dominic Russo saved my bakery. His expression softened. Then what should they say? I looked down at the envelope containing 82 pieces of proof. Say I kept my receipts. Dominic smiled. I think I can live with that. His phone vibrated against the table. He checked the screen, and the smile disappeared. What? I asked. He turned the phone toward me. Laura had sent one sentence. Mercer Financial Services had requested an emergency meeting. Evan Mercer wanted Dominic there personally. I looked at him. You are going. Yes. I stood. Then I am going. Too. Then I am going too. Dominic stared at me across the bakery table as if I had just suggested holding the meeting on the moon. No. That sounded suspiciously like an order. It was. Then my answer is still yes. He leaned back, studying me. Mercer asked for me. Mercer redirected my payments. I think that earns me a chair. Claire, this is not a bakery dispute anymore. It became my dispute the moment someone used my mother's debt as a number they could manipulate. Dominic's jaw tightened. I could almost see the old instinct returning, the one that solved problems by controlling every person in the room. Then he looked at the 82 checks beside me. Your attorney comes. Obviously. Michael too, if you want him. I do. And Laura runs the meeting. I smiled. Look at you discovering rules. Do not make me regret this. The meeting happened the next morning in a neutral conference room at a law office in Midtown. Glass walls. Gray carpet. Coffee nobody touched. Laura sat beside Dominic. My attorney sat beside me, with Michael on my other side. Evan Mercer arrived with 2 lawyers and the exhausted expression of a man who had spent the night discovering that paperwork could become heavier than stone. He looked at Dominic first. Not me. That told me everything. Mr. Russo, Mercer began, I believe this situation has been unnecessarily escalated. Dominic said nothing. Mercer continued. Administrative errors occurred during servicing migration. We can correct Miss Bennett's account immediately. My attorney leaned forward. And the other accounts? Mercer hesitated. Those require individual review. I felt anger rise in my chest. Interesting. He finally looked at me. Miss Bennett, I understand your frustration. Do you? Of course. Then explain check 64. One of his attorneys whispered something. Mercer ignored him. There were processing irregularities. Who authorized the adjustment? Silence. I opened my folder and placed a copy of the internal ledger on the table. Your credentials appear beside 18 changes to my account. Mercer looked toward Dominic again. This is precisely why I requested a private discussion. You requested Dominic, I said. You got records instead. His face tightened. This matter can be resolved quietly. Dominic's fingers moved once against the tabletop. I knew that movement now. It meant restraint was costing him something. Mercer noticed it too. Mr. Russo, surely we can handle this between ourselves. Dominic finally spoke. Answer her question. Mercer swallowed. There are complexities. That is not an answer, Dominic said. The room became very still. Mercer shifted toward him. I can make this right. Dominic's voice remained calm. You are speaking to the wrong person. He looked at me. For the first time since I had met him, Dominic Russo deliberately gave the center of the room away. Mercer followed his gaze. I took a breath. I do not want a private settlement that fixes my bakery and leaves everyone else wondering whether their records are real. Mercer shook his head. You do not understand how complicated this is. I understand 82 payments. I placed copies of the checks on the table one by one. I understand my mother worked 6 days a week to make the first 37. I understand I made the next 45 after she died. I understand every one of them cleared. Complicated is what people call the truth when they hope someone gets tired of asking for it. Nobody interrupted me. Mercer turned back toward Dominic. You cannot seriously intend to let this become public. Dominic's expression changed. Not anger. Something colder. Decision. He reached for his phone. My stomach tightened. Dominic. His eyes met mine. I know what I promised. Then remember why. Mercer looked between us, confused. Dominic slowly set the phone down again. If I handle you the way people expect me to, he said to Mercer, everyone remembers me. He paused. If this proceeds through auditors, attorneys, banks, and the appropriate authorities, everyone remembers the records. I felt my breath catch. They were almost my own words, returned in his voice. Mercer started to speak, but Dominic raised one hand. No private arrangement. No pressure. No disappearing paperwork. You answer through counsel from this point forward. Laura closed her folder. The meeting was over. Outside the conference room, Dominic stopped beside the elevator. You realize there was a time when nobody would have talked me out of handling that differently. I did not talk you out of anything. No. I reminded you that power includes choosing what not to do. He looked at me for a long moment. That is an inconvenient definition. The good ones usually are. The elevator arrived. Before the doors opened, Laura stepped into the hallway holding her phone. Claire. Something in her expression made my pulse jump. The bank completed its reconciliation. She handed me the screen. 82 verified payments. Corrected balance, 0. Beneath it was another line I had waited almost 7 years to see. Debt satisfied in full. Debt satisfied in full. I read the words 3 times before they became real. 7 years of payments. 7 years of watching numbers fall slowly while wondering whether one bad month could cost me the place my mother had built. And now the balance was 0. I covered my mouth with one hand. Dominic said nothing. Laura said nothing. Even Michael understood that silence was the only kindness I needed. She did it, I whispered. Dominic knew exactly who I meant. Your mother? I nodded. She kept her promise. My voice cracked, and I kept mine. Dominic's answer was quiet. Yes, you did. The formal release arrived 4 business days later. My attorney reviewed every line before I signed anything. The corrected servicing records were distributed to the affected businesses, and the broader investigation into Mercer continued through attorneys, banks, auditors, and the appropriate authorities. Nobody disappeared. Nobody received a mysterious warning. Nobody needed to. The records spoke loudly enough. On Friday afternoon, Dominic walked into Bennett and Rye carrying a narrow black frame wrapped in brown paper. If that is an expensive gift, turn around. Your hospitality remains extraordinary. I sell hospitality. You are currently receiving honesty. He placed the package on the counter. Open it. I narrowed my eyes. How expensive? Claire, that is not a number. Open it. I removed the paper. Inside the frame was a high-quality copy of check number 82 beside a copy of the final bank certification showing the debt satisfied in full. Beneath them was a small brass plate with one date engraved on it. The date the final payment had cleared. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The original check is still yours, Dominic said quickly. Laura supervised the copy. I looked at him. You remembered my rule. I have learned that taking your paperwork without permission is hazardous. I laughed through the pressure in my throat. This is incredibly dramatic. I have been accused of worse. Frequently, I imagine. You have no idea. I carried the frame to the wall beside my mother's handwritten menu. Dominic helped me center it, although we disagreed about half an inch for almost 5 minutes. When it finally hung straight, I stepped back. The old menu on one side, the final payment on the other. Beginning and completion. My mother's dream and the proof that nobody could claim it from us. Thank you, I said. Dominic glanced at me. For the frame? For not fixing everything for me. He was quiet. That is a strange thing to thank someone for. You could have made one call the first night. Several. That is exactly my point. I turned toward him. If you had erased the debt because you were powerful, I would always wonder whether I had actually won. Instead, I know what happened. I know every payment counted. I know the correction belongs to the records, not to a favor. Dominic looked toward the framed check. You never needed me to save your bakery. No. You needed someone to stop standing in the way of the truth. Now you are learning. A small smile touched his face. Then he reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the counter. I immediately frowned. What is that? Not money. Good opening. Inside was an invitation to the annual Russo Foundation Small Business Benefit, scheduled for the following Saturday, at the same Manhattan hotel where I had thrown 82 checks across his table. My stomach tightened at the memory. Absolutely not. Dominic almost smiled. You have not read it. I remember the room. This time you were invited. That did not improve your argument. He tapped the invitation. Several affected business owners will be there. The foundation is announcing an independent legal assistance fund for small businesses facing disputed servicing or collection claims. I looked up sharply. Your idea? Partly. Does it require anyone to owe you something? No ownership. No repayment. Independent administration. I read the card again. You really have been listening. His expression softened. More than I used to. I accepted the invitation. Fine. But I am wearing comfortable shoes. I would expect nothing less. The following Saturday, I returned to the 47th floor in a navy dress and shoes I could actually walk in. This time, nobody questioned why I belonged there. Halfway through the evening, I heard someone behind me laugh and say, "So that is the woman who threw 82 checks at Dominic Russo." I turned. Several people were smiling. Dominic had heard it too. The room gradually quieted as he rose from his chair. I expected a joke, maybe a polite correction. Instead, he looked directly at me, and the expression on his face told me whatever he was about to say had nothing to do with 82 checks anymore. Dominic stood slowly, and the room fell quiet before he said a single word. That was what power looked like around him. Nobody asked for silence. Nobody needed to. I remained beside my table, suddenly aware of every heartbeat in my chest. The man who had made the joke looked less amused now. Dominic glanced around the room, then looked directly at me. "No," he said. "She is not the woman who threw 82 checks at Dominic Russo." Nobody moved. I expected him to leave it there. He did not. "She is the woman who walked into a room where everyone knew my name and reminded me that a powerful name does not own the truth." I forgot how to breathe. Dominic continued. "For years, I believed power meant being able to make a room fall silent. Claire Bennett taught me something more difficult. Power is also knowing when to be the one who listens." Somewhere behind me, a glass touched softly against a table. Otherwise, nothing. Dominic had spent his life surrounded by people who measured every word around him, and now he was admitting, publicly, that a bakery owner from Brooklyn had changed the way he understood himself. He looked toward the other small business owners in the room. What happened to these businesses should have been discovered earlier. Organizations connected to mine failed to see what was happening. That failure carries my name, so I will not hide from my part in it. Then his gaze returned to me. "But nobody should say I saved Bennett and Rye. Claire saved every receipt. She questioned every record. She refused an easy solution when the easy solution would have left the truth buried." My eyes burned. I refused to cry in a room with this many expensive suits. Dominic apparently noticed. He had the decency not to mention it. "And," he added, the faintest smile appearing, "she may be the first person who ever told me no repeatedly and made me grateful for hearing it." Laughter moved gently through the room, breaking the tension. I shook my head. "That was dangerously close to being charming," I said when he sat down later. "I will try not to repeat the mistake." The rest of the evening felt different. Owners from the affected businesses introduced themselves. The florist from Queens hugged me. The diner owner shook my hand and told me his daughter had started organizing 20 years of records because of what happened. The new legal assistance fund would operate independently from Dominic's businesses, with outside administrators and no repayment requirement. It was not a monument to him. That mattered. Near the end of the evening, I stepped onto the terrace for air. Manhattan glittered below, thousands of windows stacked against the darkness. The door opened behind me. I did not need to turn around. "You know," I said, "most people would simply say thank you." Dominic stopped beside me, leaving enough space that the gesture felt deliberate. "Most people do not throw banking records at me. You are never letting that go." "Absolutely not." I laughed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Dinner." I looked at him. That sounded like an order. He closed his eyes. Briefly, "I am apparently still learning." "Apparently." He tried again. "Would you have dinner with me Friday night?" "Is this a business meeting?" "No." "Will Laura be there?" "I sincerely hope not." "Will anybody suddenly announce that you purchased the restaurant?" Dominic looked offended. "I can behave like a normal person for one evening. That remains unproven." His smile came slowly. "Then give me the opportunity to prove it." I let him wait just long enough to understand that waiting was part of asking. 7:30, I said. "Somewhere without a dress code that requires me to become somebody else." His expression softened. "I would never ask you to." A week later, the framed 80-second check still hung beside my mother's handwritten menu. Customers sometimes asked why I had framed an old payment instead of a photograph or an award. I always gave them the simplest answer. It reminded me that proof matters. Promises matter. Dignity matters. Dominic could make rooms fall silent, move people with a phone call, and carry a reputation powerful enough to arrive before he did. But none of that was what changed my life. What changed mine was discovering that I did not have to become smaller in the presence of power. And what changed his, I think, was discovering that the strongest person in the room was not always the one everyone feared. Sometimes, it was the one who could look power directly in the eye and make it listen.